Morning, guys. Hey, I just want to say, first of all, thanks for letting me come, but I need Pastor Steve up here for a second to start this thing off. So, in the military, there's this tradition of military challenge coins. If you're in the military, you understand that a little bit. But just quickly, I'm going to share just a bit. So, I have a few challenge coins from when I was in. So, if you're in the military and you do something awesome, and your commander or squadron or units used to have coins, they would shake your hand and give you a coin. Now, the tradition of challenge coins were if you're out having, we'll say, coffee with our friends, and somebody gets their challenge coin out and lays it on the table, everybody else has to do the same thing, and whoever has the lowest ranking coin has to buy the round for that table. The coin I'm going to give Pastor Steve means nothing because it's our. So the Warrior's Journey has a challenge coin. Anytime I do an honor event like this, I'll just say this and say it with all tenderness in my heart. There's some churches that will not honor their military because of the atmosphere of our nation right now. So when I have a pastor like Pastor Steve, who I've known for a long time, will let their military honor their military community, I'm going to bless that, and I'm going to give Pastor Steve our challenge coin. Amen. To put wherever you want it or just to think about us when you have a chance. But that's yours, and I appreciate you. So, yeah. So, first of all, I just want to say that it's been an honor to be in the military, and it's been an honor to pastor, and it's been an honor, and the Lord's really blessed me and my wife in a lot of different ways. So this morning, I just want to take us through for a minute. I want to take us through who the Warrior's Journey is, because one of the things we do in these events is, one, we want to educate the civilian world about some of the things the military has. But our spiel, if I'm going to give a 30-second military spiel, your elevator pitch, it's like we would say, the military creates a unique set of challenges. A lot of civilians don't understand that. So what we've done is we put together a team of prior pastors, chaplains, military for our organization. So when anybody comes to us, whether it's through our website, whether it's through an event like this where we're presenting, we take those individuals and we work with them one-on-one to put together a plan, help them put together a plan to be successful on the other side. So that's our 30-second thing. So I'm going to just take you through the slideshow, and these are our core values. And, everybody should have core values that you stand on and live with. So these are our core values. So number one, the warrior. Every individual warrior and their family member matters. So, again, every person that comes to us, whether it's a spouse, a military person, and we say military community because we work with military community across the board, active duty, veterans, their families. Anyone who comes with us connected to the military, we help them. And we don't have a cookie-cutter approach. If you come to us and you say, I think I have PTSD, or I have this, or I have that, we're going to sit down and talk to you and have a conversation and really get to the core issues of what's going on, because it's not always what is on the surface. So we actually triage. We're not counselors. We don't use that name, but we do say we triage each individual, each person, each family that comes to us to figure out what exactly is causing the challenges and how can we help them. So that's first. Everybody matters. Secondly, warrior helping warriors. This is something that we created, and it's, I don't think we're the only ones doing it, but it's really been key for us. So we have a fairly lean team. We have 6 people on our team right now. And if I told you everything we're doing and I had time to share everything we're doing, you'd go, how do you do that? And honestly, we get to the end of the year and we look back and we go, we don't know how we did all that. Just God. So what we do is somebody writes in, say you're a Army combat veteran, or you're Air Force pararescue, or you're whatever, maybe you're an Air Force avionics guy like I was. So we have over 300 men and women who have volunteered, and this is an opportunity for some of you possibly today that are veterans that are on the other side of your challenges. We connect that person who's contacted us with somebody who's already on the other side of that challenge. So they become the person that they call. So if they're up at 11 o'clock at night, they can't sleep, they call their connector. We do that because, one, We find that if somebody has somebody that they can call and knows going to answer the phone, it really changes their psyche a little bit. And two, it allows our team to do what we do, which is triage, program, help them get well, while they have somebody else to talk to and connect with, because we can't do all of that. So we call that warrior-to-warrior connection, and we connect each person with somebody who had like service and like challenge, because they will automatically have a bond and a connection from that point. Okay, keep going. Never give up. We believe in a better future no matter how messy it gets. If you've ever worked with veterans, actually it can get messy with anybody, but today's Veterans Day. It gets messy. I've been yelled at, I've been cussed at. We're there to help, and people yell at me because, some days PTSD wins, or some day trauma wins. Some days it doesn't win. But we believe that we're never going to give up on anybody. No matter how bad they seem, no matter how belligerent they might get to us, we're not going to give up on that person, because we know on the other side of that person is a hurt that needs to be helped, and we're going to figure out how to help it. So we never give up. We continue to do what we do, even when it gets messy and hard. We believe in partnerships. We've got over 50 partners that we work with. We work with a lot of referrals. We have our own programming in Springfield, and we have our own reboot programs and some of the things that we run. We also know that we can't do everything. So we have over 50 partner groups that we've vetted, all faith-based, all believe like we believe, that we refer people to. One of our primary partners is Mighty Oaks. They are a few special forces guys that run a week-long intensive PTSD recovery camp. We work closely with, you guys are probably familiar with Teen Challenge. It's now Teen and Adult Challenge. There's now in North Carolina, Sand Hill, North Carolina, there's a military adult challenge program that we can send our veterans to that's specifically for military. They use our resources plus theirs. There's one that we've started in Cheney, Washington, and we're going to start one in Sedalia, Missouri before too long. That's going to be an in-house women and men's working ranch in Sedalia for addiction recovery. So we work a lot with referrals, but they believe like us. So partners, we just learned early on, reinventing the wheel is a waste of time. Just find good people that do it and let them help. Okay, and spiritual resiliency. God is always at the center of healing. We know that there's no healing that happens outside of a faith element. You can go through a lot of things, you can go through a lot of programs, but without faith, there's a large amount of people that are going to fall back, come out, fall back, fall. So we're going to stay Jesus-centered. Everything we do is Jesus-centered. Every one of our partners are Jesus-centered. So we know that. That's how we work. And because of that, we have a pretty good success rate. And lastly, it's a journey. Real-time response, real-life commitment. So I say that to say this. If you communicate with us, if you go to our website, and I thought I shipped a box of resources here, and it obviously didn't show up. Thank you, United States Post Office. So if you go to our website, right on the front page, twj.org is all you have to remember. Right on the front of our webpage, there is a text number and there's a QR code. If you text that number or you scan that QR code and just write in what you're struggling with, or just write in, I need to talk to somebody, or whatever that might be, that write-in comes to our entire team's phone. We have an app called Echo Global. It comes right to our phone, and usually within 8 to 10 minutes, we reach back out to you, or that person, whoever writes in, and we begin a conversation to figure out how we can help and what that's going to look like and get that thing started. Now, beyond that, when we say it's a lifetime commitment, this is what we mean. So if somebody writes in, so at this point, we've helped just over 2,500 men and women get outside of suicide ideations. Just over 25. You can clap for that. That's a good thing. And not patting ourselves on the back for that, but that's a good thing. So, and we can say that we've only lost one person because we're committed to making sure somebody's healthy before we cut them loose. So if somebody comes to us, we triage them, we put them in our programming, we start reaching out to them, we stay connected to them for 2 full years. Their connector will stay with them for 2 years. So when somebody gets out of our programming and they say, okay, I'm good, that's fine. But once a month, somebody's going to reach out to you and say, hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Hey, at the end of 2 years, we go, hey, we know we've been pestering you for 2 years. We just want to make sure you're okay. If you're good, we're going to let you go, but you know where to find us if you ever, fall back into some kind of pattern again. So, and we do that because we never want to say we've done this successfully and then find out that somewhere along the line we weren't successful. So we've committed to following up with people for a long time after the fact, until either they quit communicating with us or we get to the end of 2 years. So that's what we do. So one of the things that we know, and the reason we focus so heavily on suicide prevention and moral injury, which is what I'm going to talk about here in a minute, is that in the war, I just looked these stats up to make sure they were right yesterday. Since 9/11, post 9/11 combat, we've lost just over 7,000 individuals in combat, like 7,100. But there's been over 31,000 men and women who have taken their own life since then. 31,000. The military, the VA will tell you it's 22 a day. We believe it's much higher than that. For one reason, the VA will not count overdoses as suicide. They just won't. And I think and we know why they do it, because as the numbers go up, it looks worse. So our intent, our goal, our mission is to get in front of people who are struggling and do preventative maintenance along with triage and responsive, intervention. So we do both, preventative and intervention. So that's who we are, and that's how we do it. So this morning I want to do a couple things. One, I always want to highlight one of our challenges that we deal with a lot, and I picked moral injury for today. So first of all, let me just say this. How many people have ever even heard of something called moral injury? One? You happen to be a counselor? Because most of the time it's just counselors. So the term moral injury is pretty recent. It's really not been identified or talked about very much. We've been paid attention to it for the last 7 or 8 years. And here's, in a nutshell, here's what moral injury is. Every one of us have a compass, a moral compass. I believe God gave us all a moral compass to start with. And we were created to give life, not take it. Right now, I understand even through the Old Testament, there were wars and there was there's all kinds of stuff that's happened even in the scriptures. But we weren't designed to do that. So moral injury is this. There's 3 ways moral injury occurs. One, you're a moral victim. At one end of the spectrum are the moral victims who experience changes in life, meaning abuses, assaults, and actions done to them. And I'll just say right up front, we know, because we've run the stats, the highest group of people in the United States that struggle with moral injury are sexually abused women. That's a fact. It's out there. You can look it up. That's the deal. They need help, and they need some of the programming that we do. But that's not our venue. Or you're a moral participant. In the middle of the spectrum are moral participants such as first responders, medical personnel, teachers, counselors, pastors, who experience changes in life, meaning their efforts to help during traumatic events. In other words, it's what you see. Some of the folks that struggle with the highest amount of moral injury in our military are our medics, because they see so much stuff and chaos. In the civilian world, your first responders, your EMTs struggle because they see so much stuff. We actually have what we call a resilience center in Landstuhl, Germany, where we run programming and we celebrate recovery and trauma recovery and all this type of stuff. And the gentleman who runs that for us is a retired Air Force E9. He spent 21 of his 25 years in the military in Landstuhl, flying back and forth from Landstuhl, which for those of you who don't know is where our medical hospital is, where anybody who's wounded or hurt in combat, they go from the Middle East to Landstuhl, Germany for treatment, and then they come back to the States. He spent 21 or 22 years on a medical plane flying back and forth from Landstuhl to the Middle East and trying to keep these men and women alive from point A to point B. That's a lot. He suppressed all of that. The 2 days after he got out of the military, he just crumbled because the pressure was gone. And so he spent and Tim wouldn't mind me telling his story. Actually, we got a video. If you go to our website and just look up moral injury, Tim shares his story on there. He was in 90 days of in-house recovery. Then he's worked with our team, been through multiple programming. Now he's healthy. He's on the other side. He's got a doctorate of ministry. He's an ordained minister, and he's running our center in Germany. But that was a long road to get to that place. That's moral injury. That's what moral injury looks like. So all three of these groups experience some kind of, I call it your compass gets jacked up. Your compass isn't pointing toward due north anymore. Moral injury causes isolation. Isolation is the biggest reason people commit suicide because they quit talking to people. I'm starting with this because I'm setting you up for the message that I'm going to share, but moral injury is the one thing that the VA won't talk about it because you can't code it. There's no code for that. Most psychologists, most counselors, secular psychologists don't talk about it because there's no way to fix it. It takes a faith element to bring your compass back into alignment. That's why we talk about it so much, because it takes Jesus and the faith piece to get your compass to come back to center. And that's what we're going to talk about somewhat today. So in the message that I'm going to share, I'm going to wrap up my story, mine and my wife's story, into a message called Stop Living Safe. Stop living safe. And I'll go as quickly as I can, but go ahead and throw that picture up. Wasn't there a picture of playgrounds on there? No. Okay. All right, I'm going to try to do this from a storytelling visual, try to create a story. So when I grew up, and I'll be 63 tomorrow. I know I only look 45, but that's okay. When I grew up, we didn't wear bike helmets. We survived. We rode in the back of pickup trucks, and we survived. I rode in the back, I don't know how many dump trucks, we survived. My dad owned a Vista. Anybody remember the old Oldsmobile Vista Cruisers? Old big station wagon, had windows in the top. Well, I had two brothers and a sister. My sister got to sit in the seat. The boys are always in the back. We're laying down, looking out the window, getting sick from looking at the clouds. All those crazy things we did, and we survived. Somehow we survived. So I thought I had a picture of a playground. On the playgrounds, the old playgrounds when I grew up, and some of you got gray hair, you know what I'm talking about. They had monkey bars, and there were just a bunch of pipes welded together. And they were about 3 or 4 stacks high. And you get up to the top, and if you fall off, you just kind of bounce your way down. And the teacher picks you up and goes, hey, you're okay, and off you go, right? We had slides that were 40 feet tall, it seemed like, and they were stainless steel. And on a hot day, you'd leave half a leg on the way down. My kids, when we were stationed in Panama, we still had one of those across the road from us, from where we lived in Albrook Air Force Station. And in Panama, had this red clay stuff. My boys, when it would rain, my boys would go over there and take that mud clay and throw it all over that slide, and then climb up it and go down it on their belly and hit the water, hit the mud, and slide for 20 feet. My neighbor would come over one day and she's like, hey, why do you let your kids do that? I'm like, because it looks fun. and she's like, well, you need to stop. And we're like, why do we need to stop? Because my kids want to come out and do it. I'm like, well, you should let them. And then we had this thing. Anybody remember what's called a maypole? If you've never played on one, it's hard to explain, but it's this tall pole. And this is what I had pictures of. It's this tall pole that's got chains coming down from it. And on the end of the chain is a metal handle. It's got 2 handles on it like this you hold on to. And there's 8 or 10 kids grab it, and you start running around the thing. And eventually you're going fast enough that you can pick your feet up. Now you got 8 or 10 kids swinging around this pole until somebody lets go. Once somebody lets go, now you got this flying sheet of metal handle. I got scars in the back of my head from a maypole in 4th grade that hit me in the back of the head. And again, you go in, the teacher looks. We didn't have nurses in school back then. It's like, yeah, it'll stop bleeding in a little while. You're good. This message, I'm not talking about not living safe as far as safe physically. We need to figure out how we can stop living safe mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. I did a quick sermon search online for, I just Googled living safe. This is what I came up with. Safe and sound in a dangerous world. Safety for all. How to feel safe in an unsafe world. The secret place of safety. Safety in times of uncertainty. 5 ways God keeps you safe in a dangerous world. And all of those, I look at them, I breeze through them, and I'm like, bad. And here's why. Because we're not always safe. We like to believe that. It's a really great thing to preach and make people feel like that. But here's the whole key to this entire, I'll give you the end of the message before I start. If you run everything God asks you to do through the lens of safety, you're going to miss about 80% of what he asks you to do. That's just the way it works out. At least that's the way it's worked out in our life. Now, it is absolutely true. If you have a relationship with Jesus and you have salvation in your life, there's nothing more secure than that. You absolutely have security of where you're headed. You absolutely have security of your destination, of your destiny. You have that. But that doesn't mean we're not going to have to make some choices in life that don't seem safe in our brain. God will sometimes ask you to make decisions that don't fit into our mold of safety. You can put those slides, the points back up now. God will sometimes ask you to make decisions that don't fit your mold of safety. Choosing to follow Christ, make him rule of your life is not necessarily a safe thing to do, especially in this day. So, my plan, and I've had lots of plans through my life. Initially, when I was in high school, I was a gearhead. I went to tech school. I went to tech shops when I was in high school, junior, senior year. Graduated from high school with all the licenses to work as a mechanic. All I wanted to do was build race motors. I loved to go to the drags. My neighbor owned a 69 Camaro that he raced. So I'd go to I'd go to the races with him. All I wanted to do is build a motor and make it go as fast as it would go for a quarter mile. So I started down that lane. I got an associate degree in mechanics at Lansing Community College. I was planning on going to Ferris State and actually getting a degree in motor building and blueprinting. And I ran out of money. So I went in the Air Force. My plan was to go in the Air Force, stay 4 years, get my degree and get out. But I got in the military. Me and my wife both just fell in love with the military and the spirited core, the people, the adventure. And we did see the world. And so we just stayed. So I changed my plan. So my plan then became, I'm going to stay and retire from the Air Force. Well, my retirement plan was this. So I was at Travis Air Force Base for 4 years, and then they tagged me for instructor duty to go to Rantoul, Illinois, Chanute Air Force Base. Armpit of the military. I'm sorry, if you're from Rantoul, I'll apologize now. But it's nothing but cornfields for miles. You had to drive an hour and a half just to do something, unless you were just going to Champaign or to the university. Of all the places we lived, that was like, blah, kind of. But I was a training instructor for 3 years there. While I was there, they decided to shut the base down. So I was the NCO in charge of moving the base, all the training from Biloxi, or from Rantoul to Biloxi, Mississippi to Keesler. So I stayed 3 more years as a training instructor in Mississippi. We were back on the ocean. So in the middle of that, I realized there's civilians that are working as the instructors, because the military puts civilians in with them for the continuity. When military comes and goes, they have the civilians. So I'm like, 25 years in the Air Force, retire E9 maybe, E8 at least, maybe E9, go back and be a GS 11 or 12, work another 15 years, retire twice, I'm good. That would have happened about 14 years ago. I didn't do either. So when the Lord started stirring our hearts in Panama to leave the military early, because I was in close enough to, most people would say at least 20. We started working with missionaries there. We had, in Panama, it was a really easy assignment. I was at what they call a through base, through assignment. So we didn't have any assigned aircraft. So unless something was coming through, we didn't have anything to do. So oftentimes we would come in and we'd cut a 10-man shift down to 2 people. Everybody else would go home. So me and Carrie started working with local missionaries, which really God started stirring our heart to be in the ministry. Then he started stirring our heart to say, hey, you should go ahead and get out. And I'm like, what? That doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense to me. Didn't make any sense to the people around me. Didn't make any sense to anybody, right? The safe thing to do, and this is where the safety piece, the safety thing to do, the safe thing to do for my wife, my kids, would have stayed to 25, or at least stayed to 20. And I was an avionics technician, which for 5 or 6 years while they were doing this, my career field was never on it. Because most people came in the Air Force, did 4 years in avionics tech, got straight out and went to work for an airline. Because it was one of the best positions I'm aware of to transition from military to civilian life. Because it's right across the board. Same thing. So we wrestled with God, but we made that choice. Okay, we'll get out early. So we did. Not my plan. Doesn't seem like a safe plan now looking back at it either. But we did. So we got out and we went to Bible school in Florida. And so he calls us to be different from the world, often leading to frightening conversations, positions, friends, coworkers, even family. 1 Peter says this in chapter 2, verses 9 to 10. He says, we are a peculiar people, the chosen people, a different people. And one of the things that I'm finding in my life and I'm finding in the churches and I'm finding lately is are we living peculiar? I like that word. Most of the translations have changed peculiar to something else. I like the word peculiar. I like to be strange. I like to be the person who's different than the people around me, particularly when it comes to decisions you make based on what Scripture says or what God asks us to do. Because that speaks to people about what you believe and who we are if we're just a little different than the world. But they're not always safe decisions. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, one of my favorite lines in there is when Susan asked Mr. Beaver, is the lion safe? Anybody remember his response? No, he's not safe, but he's good. He's not safe, but he's good. And what I've learned in my life, and my wife has learned in our life, that if you're going to make decisions in your life that don't seem safe financially or whatever that God asks you to do, what you always have to remember, always, always, always remember, that may not seem safe in my brain, but God is good. And he's never going to ask you to do something that he's not going to take care of you through. Even if it doesn't look like that or seem like that. Because when we moved to Florida to go to Bible school, and again, I'm just sharing my testimony and things that me and my wife have been through, just to give you some perspective. So we're in Bible school, and our second son, he was 9 years old. He was taking care of the neighbor's dogs while they were on vacation. He went next door. Actually, it was Christmas Eve, 1997. I know exactly what day it was, because these kind of things are etched in your brain. He went next door to feed the dogs, decided to climb the tree that was over there, and came in contact with a power line, and was killed instantly because of where he was and what happened. So I come home to sirens and ambulances and all kinds of stuff as I pulled up to that in my yard. Now, I never had military trauma, but I can tell you for years after that, when I would hear an ambulance siren, without even thinking, you just tighten up because of the event. Now again, I'm not patting myself, because I went weeks and months wrestling with God, saying, I don't understand. You asked me to leave the military and do this. I did. You asked us to come here, and we did. And if this is what it takes to go into ministry, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. Thankfully, I had a wife that was more spiritual than me at the time. And I had men around me in our church that loved me, and a pastor who encouraged me. And I ended up going back to school, graduating that next year. But that was hard. And it will really shake your faith and what you really believe when those type of things happen. And I can relate a lot of that stuff across to your military community. I talk to a lot of guys who have survivor guilt. They went into some place and 7 of their crew didn't come home, or 8 of them, or 10 of them, or they were the only one that made it out. And they're like, why did I survive? Well, I shouldn't have survived either. And it's akin to the same type of feeling and setting. The only comfort I have is knowing that God is still in control and God is still good. And it's gotten easier over the years, and here's the reason in my brain, and I think things maybe through too much, but I've got we got 3 kids now. One of them lives in Chicago, him and his wife. We see them maybe twice a year. We're driving up there for Thanksgiving in a couple of weeks to see Jacob and Jesse. So we only see him occasionally. My daughter lives in Champaign. My oldest son and his wife live in Springfield, so we see him quite a bit. But this blessed hope thing is real. I know that I only see Jacob every once in a while, but I know that I'll see Jason again. It's just going to be a longer period of time that's going to happen. Hey, thanks. So it's looking back, it certainly doesn't seem like that was a safe decision. So we fast forward to the Upper Peninsula. So we're in Florida in Bible school. We took a whole year off after that incident with Jason and decided that we're going to wait, because you can't go do pastoral ministry if you're not healthy yourself, right? So we took a year off. We waited. We tried to find some positions in Florida. Nothing ever happened. So I sent my resume to Michigan. We're from Michigan, so I sent my resume to Michigan. And what happened, I forgot to tell my wife, though. So Carrie gets a call one day, then answers the phone. This guy says, hey, this is Jim Gaston. We're in Kinchelo, Michigan, and we got your resume from the district, and we're wondering if you and Ernie would be interested in coming and maybe talking to us about pastoring our church. And Carrie's like, I wasn't home. She's like, what? So we didn't have computers. So she gets out the Rand McNally map, right? And she's looking up where Kinchelo is. And he's like, it's in the eastern Upper Peninsula, almost a detour. It's right there. It's Kinchelo. Well, Kinchelo is not on the map. Kinchelo is a closed Air Force base that's been sucked up by Kinross Township. So it's not there. So Carrie's like, oh, yeah. Wait. So she thought it was one of my friends pranking her. And she's like, no, I don't think so. I don't think we'd be interested in that at all. So I get home, and I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah. I said, well, that might have been real. So I called Jim back. And to make a long story short, the last place we ever thought we would be going or wanted to go was the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, to pastor a church. So we communicated with them. We went up. We were coming up for Christmas that year, so we said, let's go up and visit them. And I called them and said, hey, we'll come down halfway and meet you. I'm like, nope, if I'm coming up, I'm coming up. And this is Christmas time. So we get up to this little chapel in Kinross, and the snow's already this deep. And I'm like, I don't know about this. And they're like, well, let's just pray before you leave. So we prayed like you always do before you leave a meeting like that. And we're driving home, and Carrie's like, what do you think? I said, I ain't saying nothing. And she's like, well, what do you think? She's like, I ain't saying nothing either. So we drive by this, you remember the Mervyn stores that we used to have in Michigan? We drove by a Mervyn store, and she said, we might as well go buy winter wear stuff because this is where we're supposed to be. We're like, yeah, I know. So we called them back, said, yeah, we'd love to come pastor the church. Here's where this whole lens of safety thing comes in. So this whole time that I've been taking a break, I've been doing commercial sales for Sears Auto Center, selling tires and doing well. And the day I get back, and if Carrie was here, she'd confirm this whole story. I'm not making it up. I walk in, and the district manager's there, and he says, hey, we need to talk to you. I'm like, oh. What happened? He's like, oh, nothing. So we go in the office with the current auto shop manager, and they said, hey, you're doing a great job. Mike's retiring, and we want to offer you the job to be the manager at the auto center. I'm like, oh. And it's $105,000 a year plus bonus. And this is 1999. That's a lot of money. It's not a lot of money now, but in 1990, I'm like, what? And once again, I'm going, God, are you just seeing? I mean, so what's the safe decision in that with the son going in high school and 2 younger kids and my wife? In Kinross, they were able to offer us $500 to help with rent. Or I could make this. What do you decide? And me and Carrie both knew the only decision was we need to go pastor the church in the UP because that's where God told us to do. Did it make any sense? No. But it was the best place to raise the kids. The church grew fairly quickly. I've had such a blast pastoring in Michigan, meeting pastors like Pastor Steve and Melissa. And I was a presbyter for a while, and I was part of the church planting team. It was a wonderful experience. That's 18 years, 19 years we spent in Michigan. But was it on our agenda? No, we were living in Central Florida. So I remember calling Brother Leach and saying, hey, I think that me and Carrie, actually I know me and Carrie are supposed to take the church in Kinchelo. And Brother Leach's words were this: well, either you're called or you're crazy, one of the two. And I guess we were called because we stayed there a long time, and it was a blessing. So that's the mentality of safety I'm talking about. I'm not talking about physical safety all the time. I'm talking about, do you run everything through the lens of what's going to be good for you or what God's asking you to do? So I'll make this statement again. If you run everything through the lens of, is this safe financially, physically, whatever, for everything God's going to ask you to do, you're going to miss a whole bunch of stuff that God's going to ask you to do, because you'll say no. You'll just flat say no. So how do we get around that? Colossians 1:23 tells us to live established and firm in what we know and who we know. So we need to be established and firm in three things. And I'm just going to go through this quickly so we can wrap this up. We need to be established and firm, first of all, in the gospel. We know what the gospel says. We know who Jesus is. We know Jesus is Lord of our life, King of our life, and that he is who we need always. We need to be established and firm in our purpose. Our purpose is to live a life that represents and presents Jesus to people around us in everything we do. As a pastor, and I've said it for years, as long as I've been pastoring, the pastor's job is to raise up you to go out and be ministers of the gospel. So our purpose is to go out and be ministers of the gospel in whatever avenue, vein, people that God has in your sphere of influence right now. And thirdly, we have to absolutely have our trust in Jesus and know that he is good. And know that he is good. And we need to remember that he's not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of a sound mind, it says in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. And let me just read you these four, and then I'm going to wrap up, because fear will sidetrack all of what I just said. Genesis 15:1 says, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your reward. You're very great. You will be very great. Deuteronomy 20, verse 1, when you go out to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots and an army larger than yours, do not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, is with you. Joshua 1:9 says, haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And Isaiah 41:10 says this, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will hold you with my righteous right hand. So God gives us everything that we need to say yes when everything in our brain wants to say no. Gives us everything. So here's how I want to wrap this up this morning. So I'm talking about not living safe. And I'm going to bring this back around to what I talked about with moral injury. And maybe it's PTSD. Moral injury is just the one I decided to highlight this morning. Everything in your brain, and this applies to, and the reason I like to talk about moral injury, because moral injury is not just related to military life. I've shared this concept of moral injury at several different places, several different churches, and I've had almost as many civilians say, hey, I need to pray with somebody because this has happened in my life. So this is I'm not just talking to veterans this morning. However, I'm talking to veterans this morning. So I'm going to say this. I'm in a group. I saw how many people stood up. And I'm not silly enough to stand here and do the math, but somebody's here that's still struggling with things you haven't talked about. And this is why I like this message the Lord gave me about safety, because in your brain, as a military guy or woman, in your brain, it's saying, don't say anything about this. Don't talk to anything. Every time you think about it, your brain's going to say, no, it's dangerous. Don't tell them. We have a video that we show. We're talking to a guy, and this guy says, I can't talk to anybody. I can't tell anybody what I've done because they think I'm a monster. Listen, the safe thing to do is to talk to somebody about it. The safe thing to do is get some prayer. The safe thing to do, if you're struggling with military issues, whether it's moral injury, PTSD, isolation, whatever those things may be, is to talk to somebody about it, get some prayer about it, and figure out how to get into some help about it. That is the right thing to do, but your brain's telling you that's not the safe thing to do. So this morning, I'm going to ask you to do the unsafe thing and make a response to what your brain is telling you is wrong. So I don't know how you guys do altar calls. I just want to take a minute and say, listen, I'd love to pray with anybody who just wants me to, or I'm sure Pastor Steve, you guys have a prayer team that can pray with people, but I'd just like to take a minute and, I guess you guys usually say, how do you, I just stand up with me. I'm just going to do this. So, I'm just going to say this, and I'm not going to belabor the point because you're military people. And I've already told you what I thought and what I think the Lord's doing. So if you want to get either a little further past where you are or past where you are or start a process of getting past where you are stuck, we want to pray with you this morning. Then after that, I'm going to be out in the foyer, and I want to be able to connect with you and help you continue to process things you're dealing with, because I can do that from a distance, and I can help you. And the Warrior's Journey can help you, and that's why I do what I do. I love to do this. I love these moments when I can say we can, because I know we can, and more than that, I know Jesus can. So if you've not let Jesus be Lord of your life this morning, that's the first decision you need to make, and we'd love to pray with you about that. Past that, if you're struggling, we just want to pray with you. So I'm just set this mic down, come down here, and wait for you all. Pastor Steve, you can close whenever you feel.